Good afternoon, subscribers. Gico here, and I've just been having a look at the paper 1 year 2 exam and the paper 2 year 2 A-level exam. And of course I did say whenever I did the which video was it? The macro video, I said once you had taken the micro paper and the macro paper, then we can have a look at the topics which have been covered, and then maybe have a little bit of an insight as to where the likely direction of travel might be on the paper 3, the themes paper, which is of course tomorrow morning, and I wish you all the best for that. So I've made just a few notes here, and it's very difficult, this, I think, very difficult in order to predict. However, it's certainly possible to have a look at the general areas of theory which have appeared on these two papers, and then to pull out the areas which haven't really been assessed, and then from there maybe we can come up with something. But again, it's very, as I really stress the point, this is quite difficult to predict what the likely case study might be and then the subsequent questions. Anyway, here goes for what it's worth. So I'm thinking, obviously, remember on your multiple choice questions, remember to bring a calculator obviously for those 30 multiple choice questions that you've got. And remember that will be a combination of micro and macro all mixed in together. Certainly my students seem to enjoy the multiple choice papers, and my students last year, I don't think anybody really got less than 24 out of 30. So it really is an area in which you can make up a lot of ground. If you haven't already done so, I would take a look at the International Board, OCR CIE International Board papers. I'll put a link below and you can have a look at those multiple choice. Now those papers are more difficult, but if you can do those, then you should find the questions tomorrow much easier. I've stressed that on previous videos anyway. So what about in terms of the micro areas of assessment which have not really appeared yet? Well, I think the obvious three are, number one, competition, market structures. Now I know there was that question on monopoly, the essay question on your micro paper, and to do with efficiency, but that leaves, that's wide open, isn't it, for oligopoly, monopolistic competition, contestable markets, natural monopoly, etc., etc. So there's all of that that's certainly worth looking at. Monopsony, so obviously we've had the whole stuff about university tuition, public versus private sector provision, market failure, all that jazz, but there was nothing there on cost-benefit analysis either, so maybe that's something to look at. So I'm going to sort of nail my colours to the mast and say maybe competition policy, monopsony, so the labour, additional stuff on labour markets, and cost-benefit analysis. So that's my thoughts on micro. What about macro then? Well, the glaring omission yet again, ladies and gentlemen, this just can't go on and on and on. At some point this is going to be assessed, and maybe it will be tomorrow. So the financial sector, still a big chunk of the year 2 specification, nothing really assessed on that. Interesting though that your case study was on Iceland, because of course Iceland, and I had a guest speaker come talk about this not so long ago, Iceland's economy, when the financial crash hit, the authorities in Iceland really nailed the bankers, and they were jailed and so on. And so that whole notion of moral hazard and lending above and beyond what people were able to pay back, knowingly lending above and beyond, that was really stamped upon, that sort of whole regulation notion there. So financial sector certainly. Maybe there'll be a link from your macro into the themes paper on Iceland, who knows. International trade, not really touched upon. You had that question talking about whether Iceland would benefit from continuing to contribute to foreign aid budgets. Now that might manifest itself in increased trade, maybe you brought that into your answer. But certainly comparative advantage, absolute advantage, opportunity cost ratios, all of that stuff. Then monetary policy. So you had a lot about fiscal, Laffer curve, tax, etc., but nothing really on monetary policy. And inflation. the NIRU, the non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment, globalization, and free trade areas. So they're the sort of key macro areas. I'll read those again. Financial markets, international trade, monetary policy, inflation, stroke Phillips, NIRU, globalization, and then free trade areas. So, how would we tie all that together? So this is what I'm thinking, and this is just my thoughts. I've got no inside line on this whatsoever. But what if you got a pre-release case study that was on the banking sector, and obviously related in some way to the financial crash of 2008? So you could talk about the banking sector, you could talk about competition within the banking sector and the number of retail banks on the high street. You could talk about the new disruptors like Monzo, Jordan, you know what I'm talking about there. Monetary policy could then be sort of tied into that alongside inflation. And then you could also bring into maybe a case study on that the notion of globalization and systemic risk and contagion, because of course the financial crash started in the US, but then because of globalization and the intertwined nature of the international financial sector, that became our problem as well. So that systemic risk issue, and then maybe you could talk about, or they might expect you to talk about, well, how would Brexit and removing ourselves from the European Union, how would that, or how would that not, could not, possibly shelter us from a similar crisis in the future? So in that way you could cover all of those topics which I've mentioned, which haven't yet been covered, with one case study on banking. So that's what I'm thinking, ladies and gentlemen. Make of it what you will. And regardless of what you make of it, I wish you all the very best in the final paper, paper 3 themes tomorrow. So best wishes for that, and it's probably for me, for the videos you'll watch of mine, this is bye for now, and I hope the rest of your exams, your summer, your university goes well. Bye!